LosAngeles.com bonus. Los Angeles plays itself.
This is the city, Los Angeles, California. They make movies here. I live here. Sometimes I think that gives me the right to criticize the way movies depict my city. I know it's not easy. The city's big. The image is small. Los Angeles, it is said, is the most photographed city in the world.
Gotta find somebody in L.A.
Maybe it's not even in L.A.
How far'd you say we're going?
Los Angeles?
L.A.? L.A.'s good enough for me, mister.
Hello, Pliskin. Welcome to L.A.
No. You can see the sea out there if you can see it.
We might wonder if the movies have ever really depicted Los Angeles. This is the city, Los Angeles, California. They make movies here. I live here.
Los Angeles plays itself. This is not a foreign film. It is available on YouTube. I just saw a remastered version of this movie. I think it's fantastic, but it's not for everyone. This is a movie I'd say for those interested in movie history, Los Angeles history, and architectural history. It's a long movie. It's almost 3 hours. There was an intermission. But if you're curious at all, just check it out on YouTube. I'll provide the link. And stay tuned for some discussion with the filmmaker.
Yeah, I hope if you saw it before, you were pleased with the new version. And if you hadn't seen it before, well, hope you liked it. One change in movies over the past 10 years, maybe I should have mentioned, is there has been a rediscovery, a reappreciation of modernist architecture, which has found its way into movies in the last 10 years, so that it's no longer the case just that villains live in classic modernist houses. Now the rule is that gay men live in modernist houses and lesbians live in craftsman houses. So, does anyone have any questions I can try to answer? Yes?
Was there anything that you wanted to include in the movie but decided not to for whatever reason?
No, not. Oh, I'm sorry. He was asking me if there was anything that I wanted to include in the movie that I wasn't able to. Is that right? Yeah. Well, obviously, a lot of movies have to be excluded, which are very interesting movies that I just didn't have. They didn't quite fit into the structure of the film. One thing, I was making this film just as the Valley was voting on seceding from the city. So when I was working, I wasn't sure if the San Fernando Valley was going to be part of Los Angeles anymore. So one thing that led to the exclusion of Valley films and not having a section about Valley films. So there are a number of Valley films that I might have otherwise included that I admire, such as Magnolia, and particularly, I guess, my favorite, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which is a film I would have liked to have had included, yeah. But in the end, no, there weren't. That wasn't really the case. Yes?
At the end, as far as the working class cinema in Los Angeles, you go through the African American directors who came from outside. Is there more to the working class cinema in Los Angeles than that?
He was asking me about the working class cinema in Los Angeles, and that those films were mostly films made by black filmmakers about the black working class in Los Angeles, and were there other films like that that I didn't present?
Perhaps
from other ethnicities. There were a couple films about the Chicano working class in the movie American Me and El Norte. American Me is a film about gangs, and one thing that I think is unfortunate is that until quite recently, films about Chicanos had to be films about Chicano gangs. That was the only reality of Chicano life that could be made into a movie. But there are some exceptions, such as one film I think I might have included was My Family, another film by Gregory Nava, who made El Norte. And more recently, after this film was made, A Better Life, which I think is a good film, for no other reason than it shows a detective who does some detecting, which is actually rare in detective movies. Usually detectives just wait around until someone beats them up, and that enables them finally to solve the crime, right? But this guy actually goes out and looks for the guy who stole his truck, and he does a lot of detecting, although he's not a professional detective. As for films about the white working class in Los Angeles, I think there's an absence of such films. I have to think a little bit to give you an example of such a film, or maybe someone could remind me.
They live.
Huh?
They live.
They live.
Wayfarers, actually, not working class.
Pardon?
People who get dumped in LA, actually, not working class.
Like They Live.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure, They Live is a very interesting film, and I would certainly recommend the book that Jonathan Lethem wrote about it, which is one of the best analyses of a particular film I've ever read. Yeah, that's an interesting film about class that I didn't talk about and perhaps should have. Yes, any other? Yes.
The last part of your film was very downbeat. What were your conclusions about Los Angeles that you wanted to bring forth from you? What feelings do you have about Los Angeles? And do you think that the films being made about Los Angeles actually change, or do they just reflect?
You said the last part of the film was very downbeat, and I'm sorry, what was the second part? What was
your conclusion about Los Angeles? And what do you think about Los Angeles from that last part? It seems like you don't have a very good feeling about where the city is going.
What is my feeling about Los Angeles, and do I have a good feeling about where the city's going? And then finally, you wanted to ask.
Do the films about Los Angeles reflect, or do they have to sort of change in terms of changing where the city is?
Yeah. Question of if I can extrapolate a little, the question of whether movies reflect ideas that are already existing, or do they change those ideas? Indeed, the film is tragic, exclusion, and it ends with the, let's say, the end of, well, really, in a way, the end of working class Los Angeles as manufacturing jobs and traditional working class jobs are becoming scarcer and scarcer. Like the closed down just this past week, I think, of the, I believe it's the Boeing plant in Long Beach where the C-17s were made, which is closing, and how many people are losing their jobs there? 30,000? How many?
3,000.
3,000, sorry. A loss of another 3,000 jobs, which is, I mean, you know, this is the history of the United States from the 1980s until today. George Packer, in his book, called it The Unwinding. And that's, I think, a good book about the way in which the working class has been, well, let's put it this way. The Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate decided that banks were too big to fail. But they never thought about the possibility that the working class is too big to fail. So they've allowed the working class to fail. so that unemployment has increased. The jobs that are available are not as good as the jobs that people once had. And that's, well, that's not just something I'm saying. I mean, that's, again, I'd say, what might have been novel in the film 10 years ago has now become a truism. So yeah, I don't know, I guess I felt in a way more optimistic about Los Angeles a few years ago than I did today. You know, Los Angeles has become, maybe from being the most anti-union city in the country to becoming one of the strongest union cities in the country. And I think that is the hope for the future of Los Angeles. Movements like the fast food workers demanding a $15 an hour wage. While we're waiting for that, it might be a good idea next time you go to a fast food place like McDonald's or Taco Bell or something, tip the workers. Although you all probably don't go to those places. Although I do. Quite frequently, to tell you the truth. Well, anyway, I hope that answers the question, and let me take another one.
I think it would be interesting to contrast Mexican areas in LA and Beverly Hills. When you go to Beverly Hills, it's like walking through a cemetery. There are no people in the streets. Everybody is isolated. There's no sense of community. You go into some of these so-called lower class communities, there's a lot of kids running in and out of each other's homes. They know each other. They're going to have memories when they grow up. In Beverly Hills, kids grow up, except maybe a dad's ass off and mom going to her shrink and Latin nannies babysitting the kids. So you need to look at it beyond just economics. There's lifestyle. I'd rather be living in a lower class community in LA if I was a kid than living in Beverly Hills where you make play dates and you have to get driven 25 miles and everything is screened and there's no spontaneity. So I think there's different ways to look at it. And today, the creative energy is not coming from the white people.
Any new projects now?
Having just finished this and just returning to my work as a teacher, no. What I'd like to work on, what I've intermittently been working on is a book based on this film, which would be fun, interesting, I think. And maybe other films about Los Angeles, a film about modern architecture in Los Angeles, which really does have a particularly rich history, which I only touched upon in this film.
Yeah. Where did you grow up and where do you live?
Where did I grow up and where did I live? Okay, I grew up in Brentwood. I went to Brentwood Elementary School. I went to Emerson Junior High, and then I became part of the first class at Paul Revere Junior High. And then I went to University High School. And then, let's see, I lived around USC when I was going to school there, and when I was going to UCLA, I lived mostly in Santa Monica, a little bit in Venice. And when I was away from Los Angeles, I moved back. I moved into Park La Brea, which, I don't know, was someplace I always wanted to live. I guess to me, when I was a kid, it was the most glamorous place on earth. So I lived there for 10 years, and then I moved to Silver Lake, which is where I live today. So that's the story. I don't know if that's too interesting, but yeah. That's basically it. Yes?
I'm also kind of curious that you're looking at Hollywood, and you're essentially making this essentially like a critique of the false tinsley image that Hollywood presents to the world, and contrasting that with the reality of Los Angeles. And is this a regionalist sort of view, or why not, the way Hollywood portrays all cities, or was there something special about Los Angeles other than the fact that it's your hometown that you make more of it?
That's a bit of a hard question to summarize if you didn't hear it. Let's see. I'm looking at Hollywood and I'm offering a critique of the way that Hollywood depicts Los Angeles. And would this be something that's true of all cities? Did I pick Los Angeles simply because it's the city where I live? And I could say the city I know best. I'm sure that, of course, one can make you could make movies about Detroit or New York. Well, obviously New York, because a lot of films are shot there, or even maybe Chicago, and there would be similar distortions in the way those cities are depicted. So yeah, I picked Los Angeles because it was what I knew, and I also thought that this sort of critique had broader implications than just talking about movies of Los Angeles. The greater critique, which is, to put it in the broadest terms, that the movies, whether they're superficially liberal or conservative, all are designed to preempt the conception of an emancipatory politics, that is to say, of a real politics. To me, I saw this particularly clearly in films about Los Angeles, and in looking at the history they present of Los Angeles and my knowledge of the real history, I was able to maybe show in more specific ways how that operates. But obviously that's a general function of movies, and it's not limited to movies about Los Angeles. I don't know. Is that a good answer does that really answer what you're saying, or you want to add something?
Well, I was thinking about Luciano Visconti and him, looking around Italy and the post-war Italians going like, oh, he's just airing dirty laundry. But nonetheless, he was showing a much more realistic image than a lot of the CSC tape.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Yeah, what I propose in the end is a kind of revival of neorealism. And I could say this, that neorealism had a kind of start in the United States. Well, first of all, the United States was very important in the history of neorealism in that it was the success and sometimes the financing of neorealist films that made their worldwide success possible. And there was a beginning of a neorealist movement in the United States that I think was nipped in the bud by the blacklist and the removal of communists and other left-wingers such as Charles Chaplin and Orson Welles from the American film industry. But that's another story. A bit of which I tell in another film called Red Hollywood that I made in collaboration with Noel Birch, which we've also recently remastered and which I hope will reappear in Los Angeles sometime in the near future, or early next year at least. Yes?
Are you able to use these clips under fair use, or have any of the studios given you a particular hard time?
Am I able to use these clips under fair use, and have any of the studios given me a hard time? No one has ever raised objection to the film. Yes, I was, and will be able to use them under fair use. So, no copyright holders were injured in the making of this film. Yeah, so it can be shown. And I hope it will maybe finally appear on in other ways than on YouTube. Which, as wonderful as it is not really a medium for looking at 3-hour movies, I think. Yes?
I really love the politicalness of the film. I hadn't seen it and I didn't expect that. But did you ever consider using Mi Vida Loca in it by Allison Anders?
Did I ever consider using Mi Vida Loca by Allison Anders? No, because it's another, gang movie, which I find a little questionable. Yeah, I like Allison Anders a lot, and I wish I had been able to find a place for one of her movies in this movie. Well, actually, at one time there was a small bit of border radio, but that somehow didn't fit. Slade, what do you say we call it a night? Huh? All right?